Hey, it's Rob, and welcome to this episode. Today, we're going to learn all about pressure, how we put it on ourselves, where it comes from, what actually pressure is, and most importantly, how you can start to work with the pressure you're putting on yourself or seemingly from external places so that you can reduce your reaction, if you like, to the pressure and perform at your best. So why do we need to learn about pressure? It's something we're going to face in any area of our life, right? Not just in running. It could be a work pressure, family pressure, relationship pressure, financial pressure, right? Any area it can happen. We're going to obviously focus in running today, but we need to learn how to understand pressure and then how to deal with it so that we can bring our best performance. Because one of the associating factors with pressure is we tighten up, we get further away from our process or our flow, and our mind goes to the future and starts to anticipate things that could go wrong. And that takes us out of our best performance or our maximizing our potential. Associated things are such as tension in our body, trying to control the future, which obviously sounds funny, but we all try and do it, and limiting our creativity, if you like, our expression, and bringing our full self to our training and our racing and our performance. So we're going to go through what pressure is, how to deal with it. Here are a few examples. And my outcome for you for this session is really for you to understand how you put pressure on yourself. What's your flavor? How do you stack the pressure on yourself so you can first of all have awareness? All of this sports psych stuff, all of this mindset stuff has to start with awareness. If you're not aware of what's happening, it's very difficult to change anything. And that's why it's great you've got a friend that can say, hey, do you realize how hard you are on yourself? Do you realize how much pressure you put on yourself? That can help us build the awareness. But if you can spot it yourself, then you can start to reframe it and start to use strategies to minimize it and get on with doing what you love. All right, so we're going to go through all of those cool things. Let's start off with this. Pressure is a superpower. Let's start from there. In the past, it's all been this negative stuff. It's been the enemy of performance. And while some of that is true, let's start to reframe it. It means you care. It means you want to perform well. And it's behind so many of your best performances right throughout life in different contexts. So let's really acknowledge that without pressure, perhaps you wouldn't have performed as well as you did in the past. And I hope you can start to relate to that a different way. So what are we doing here? We're already starting to reframe that word pressure from a negative influence in our life, all these detrimental things, that's actually potentially one of our superpowers. And all we need to do is perceive it in that way and learn how to channel it and throw the harness on it and ride it, if you like, instead of being afraid of it and thinking it's all bad. So let's get on with it. Let's first of all start with a story. The story is going to be from Tour de France. Greg LeMond, one of the greatest riders of all time, attributed with arguably, and still talked about, one of the best comebacks in sporting history. So this story comes from the Tour de France. 1986, Greg LeMond won the Tour de France. American rider. This story is actually featured in Matt Fitzgerald's book, How Bad Do You Want It? One of my favorite books in it. So Greg LeMond won the Tour de France in 1986, was planning on going back to defend it in 1987. And he was out, funnily enough, turkey hunting with his brother-in-law and some other people. And in that turkey hunt, Greg LeMond was behind a bush. It's a very horrible story, but it's also a little bit kind of funny in hindsight. His brother-in-law saw the bush moving and thought it was a turkey and actually shot Greg LeMond with a shotgun. They say he had about 70 pellets. So a shotgun has a lot of pellets in its cartridge. 70 pellets penetrated his body. One went into his liver, kidney. He lost a lot of blood. Doctors think that he was minutes away from bleeding out and deep embedded in his spine as well. So Greg LeMond almost died from being shot from his brother-in-law in 1987. He then went into deep depression as he was recovering from these horrific injuries of being shot. And the rehab saw him lose his muscle mass, of course, They said he would never actually walk the same way again because of the damage to his body, specifically his spinal cord. And Greg LeMond was at the peak of his athletic potential when this accident happened. So for 2 years, he went into rehabilitating his injuries. He was out of professional cycling for these 2 years. And unfortunately, I thought that was the end of his career. Greg returned to the Tour de France 2 years later. But instead of coming to the race with a mindset of how lucky am I to be here, or, how, a mindset like that, he actually came with a mindset of, I need to prove myself, right? I need to show the world that I'm still worthy of my success. And he entered the lead up with that kind of mindset. It was so much pressure he built on him. He it was all self-imposed, right? About having to prove, why should I come back to the Tour de France and not win? Because I need to prove this to my fans, world, sponsors, all that kind of stuff. So in that Tour de France, he was struggling. He his tight muscles, of course, racing thoughts, always a fear of failure. What if I'm not as good as I was? What if I don't live up to the expectations? What if I don't win? What if I'm never going to be as good as I was? Matt Fitzgerald says he went through this kind of metamorphosis during that Tour de France. This was in 1989, just to correct him. And in that race, he started to realize what he was doing to himself in his mindset. And Matt Fitzgerald said he entered this kind of shift, which he called non-judgmental competitiveness. And Greg LeMond shifted his mindset from having to win, must get the outcome, must prove myself, must still be good enough to be worthy. And he said in the book, it's quoted as saying, all I can do is give my best effort, moment to moment. Pressure is a sign I'm ready, not a signal that I'm failing. So instead of racing from a fear and a judgment perspective, Greg LeMond just rode on the bike in front of him, and he just did it moment by moment, best effort. That was his intention and his mantra. Greg LeMond went on to win that 1989 Tour de France by 8 seconds. And as I said, still one of the greatest comebacks in sporting history. He actually went on to win it a further time the year later as well. Did the pressure disappear? Well, it was still there. He just changed the meaning of it, and his performance followed. So let's have a deep look into what pressure actually is. If you look at an equation, pressure equals meaning plus uncertainty, right? So pressure is a combination of how much we care or how much this means to us, and then the uncertainty of the outcome. So I wonder if you can start to break it down, maybe a previous race or event that you've done, and think about how you built that pressure. Did you make that race mean that if I can finish this race, it means I'm finally good enough, right? If it was tied to your self-worth. But if I fail, who am I? And where do I go from here? Did you make it mean that if I can PB at this race, it means I'm improving, or it means that I'll finally feel good enough in my running club? Will it mean that you have the ability to win the race or to get a sponsorship or something? Does this all hinge on this race? And then the uncertainty thing. How you deal with that uncertainty. This is going to be another subject of a future podcast, because I'm actually looking at these studies on how the brain perceives uncertainty. And how does it do that? Threat, right? So our brain goes into a threat state, and it is afraid of the uncertainty because there's no certainty, funnily enough. And so when we enter the threat state, right, we go into, here we go again, it seems like every podcast is talking about that sympathetic response, fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And what we're doing is, oh no, this race is danger. It means so much to me because all these outcomes that I need to get, otherwise I'm not good enough, I'm not going to be accepted by my peers, they're going to judge me, I'm going to have to do this all again. And then, pardon me, the uncertainty is the threat. I don't know if I'm going to finish. I don't know if I'm going to PB. I don't know what the weather's going to be like. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm good enough, etc., etc., etc. So this might be real for you in thoughts such as, if I don't hit a PB today, I'm failing. Everyone in my group is faster than me. I can't fall behind, right? I've trained too hard to mess this race up. Everything rides on today. I have to finish this race or workout perfectly. I can't make a mistake. If I don't win, I'm not a real runner. So we start to overthink things, pacing, nutrition, everything just starts to become kind of catastrophic and out of our control. Or it could be that perfectionistic mindset where we tie our identity to the outcome and having to get it right. Could be comparing yourself to teammates or friends or running buddies or what the coach thinks of you, what your social media thinks of you. And then we start to drift away from our performance and we go into these uncertain and meaningful outcomes. So the more we think about outcome, the less we're actually focused in flow, right? So our head goes to how am I doing instead of what do I need to do? I hope you get this distinction there. And then there's also that fear of regret. Like I can't hold back, or I'll always wonder if I could have done better, right? So this is kind of all the stuff that's swimming around, and I'm hoping that you start to get the awareness around this. So if we take that equation right throughout this podcast, that fear equals meaning plus uncertainty, right? Let's go to a recent study, Houghton et al. Houghton is a lead author, 2024 study. It's actually a meta study of qualitative research. So meta study is when researchers take a whole bunch of studies and they analyze them and they look at the trends or the results from across all these other studies, and then they surmise what's going to happen based on other studies. So this is 29 studies they looked at in this meta study, quite a few. And qualitative, two types of researchers, so quantitative and qualitative. So quantitative is where you're doing surveys, data, research. If you've ever filled out a form that says, do you strongly agree, agree, disagree, neutral, or strongly disagree? That's a quantitative research method. And they might look at ABS data or population data, that kind of stuff. And they gather all the data in an experimental design, and they come up with an outcome. Qualitative research is when the researchers will interview people one-on-one and get their subjective experience. So they might go to a running group and interview people about what type of self-talk do you use when you're running, and they might capture different experiences of different runners, and they'll report that in the study. So this is 29 qualitative research on elite athletes, and guess what? They all of the meta studies show that these elite athletes also suffer from pressure, of course, right? They're no different than you and I. But the ones that they learned from, they had strategies for how to deal with the pressure. And so what's so important about this study is most studies into this kind of pressure stuff is all about how do they choke? What's going on in that athlete when they didn't make that shot, or when they missed that final putt to win the tournament, or where they were leading by 3 shots in the final hole and they choked and they lost by 4 shots, right? And most of the studies are looking into the science of choking. This study actually looked at what athletes did well, and that's why I wanted to share this one with you. So here's some key findings from that 2024 study by Houghton et al. Thriving athletes demonstrate high self-belief, and we can look at self-efficacy in there. So self-efficacy, it's very hard for me to say. Self-efficacy is your power that you believe you can actually be effective or do something, right? So these athletes had high self-belief, and they saw demanding situations as, you guessed it, challenges rather than threats. And they stayed focused on the task in front of them instead of rising stress and anxiety around performance outcomes. Interesting. So we're going to start off with that. They saw it as a challenge instead of a threat. Like, oh no, this race is going to be the end of me, or my self-worth is tied to it. That's a threat. Bring on this race. I'm ready for this. I've trained as much as I can. Bring it on. I'm here. I'm ready. Let's go. Now, the next thing that these athletes had in common out of these 29 studies, mental skills matter to them. They used Same stuff that we teach in the podcast and in the Mindset for Runners course. Imagery, self-talk, pre-performance routines, mantras, breathing techniques, and mindfulness, right? And they use this to regulate their stress and maintain their focus. So these athletes recognized the pressure was coming, switched it around to challenge instead of threat, and they used the mental skills with their mind and the emotional skills to settle their body. Remember those two coping mechanisms we always talk about: problem-focused skills, so reframing, planning, doing what if, worst case scenarios, making sure every box is ticked, and then the emotion focused is breathing techniques like calming the nervous system down, visualizing, focusing on the moment, focusing on the self-talk, and calming down the nervous system. Right, next thing, these athletes found that pressure is neutral, right? Pressure is a thing. It's our relationship with the pressure that makes it problematic. So when the pressure came and the athletes saw the pressure as a threat and they saw the situation as exceeding their resources, if you like, that was when the pressure built and became a problem. But when they're like, pressure, hello, pressure, my old friend, here you are. Yeah, that I feel that. Wow, yes, this is important to me, and I don't know what's going to happen, right? Meaning and outcome, meaning and uncertainty. But I do have the skills to reframe you and to learn from you. One of my favorite quotes on pressure comes from Australian cricketer Keith Miller back after the Second World War. Keith was a pilot in the Air Force for Australia, and he was being interviewed many years later. Sorry, he was a pilot. I'll slow down. He was a pilot in the Second World War for Australian pilot. Flew with the British Air Force. Correction, he flew for the Australian Air Force in Britain, and he's also all-rounder in the Australian Test cricket team. Michael Parkinson, the famous interviewer, was interviewing Keith Miller many years later, and he said to Keith, "How do you deal with the pressure of playing cricket?" And famously, Keith Miller said, "Pressure is having a Messerschmitt on your tail." He said something else. Playing cricket is not, right? That is called a reframe, and it is a very good reframe. So when Keith Miller is flying in his Spitfire or Hurricane, whatever he was flying, and he had a German Messerschmitt following him, trying to shoot him down, he said, "That's pressure. Playing cricket? You got to be kidding me, Michael Parko." This is how we can start to reframe. And this is why we say pressure is neutral. It's our relationship with it. Our appraisal of that pressure will predict our performance. So athletes in this study who interpreted pressure as meaningful and manageable consistently performed better. I hope you're already starting to understand that it's not the pressure itself that's making the failure or the choking or the poor performance. It's our interpretation of it. Let's go to another story. Leslie Patterson from another one of my favorite books, The Brave Athlete, by herself and her husband, Simon Marshall. So pressure is coming from ourselves, is what Leslie said. She was a 5-time Xterra world champion triathlete, and she tells so vividly how she used to put the pressure on herself. Before the start line, she would have thoughts in the past like, I have to win this. If I fail, I'm not good enough, right? Ouch, that's your identity at stake here. Everyone expects me to dominate. And she said she would race tight and restricted. She was overreactive to every little thing and hyper alert to mistakes. And she'd blow her race regularly because of these thoughts. So Leslie's breakthrough came through working with Simon Marshall, who is a sports psych. And they have, if you remember the last podcast on the chimp brain by Dr. Simon Peters, they really embraced that in their work together. And so they would do a thing called chimp purging, where Leslie would say out loud all of her fears or write them down and let that emotional brain vent, and let it vent before the event, right? Before she has to actually perform. And, on this podcast, I recommend you do that fear setting document by Tim Ferriss, who does this exactly. Like, what are my greatest fears? What could actually happen? How will I prevent this from happening? And then what will I do if it actually does happen? So you plan, you're taking away, yes, the uncertainty is what you're taking away by doing this stuff. So then Leslie would do the reframing. She would shift it from, I have to win or I'm nothing, to I want to win because competing brings out the best in me. Hear that shift, right? have to I want to, moving from threat back to challenge. And then she had the automatic responses. So building habits like she'd count her pedal strokes on the bike. She'd do breathing resets, like the box breathing or the physiological sigh or the longer out breath. And she'd have micro focus points to guide her performance. So this is things like we talk about chunking your race down, right? I'm just going to focus on this section or this kilometer or this 500 meters or this 100 meters, right? I'm here now. That's what I'm here to do. And this became her way that she turned pressure into fuel. And she went on to win multiple world championships. All right, so where are we at? We understand that pressure is meaning plus uncertainty. We understand that we can change the meaning of pressure, like Keith Miller or like Greg LeMond or like Leslie Patterson, and we can take away the uncertainty by bringing our performance, either planning as much as we can, accepting I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm here anyway, bring it on, and working on staying in our performance right here, right now, and executing our job as an athlete instead of having that constant evaluation. How am I doing? Am I on my splits? Am I going to do this? Am I on the race pace? Am I eating right? Blah, 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 and getting caught up in outcomes, right? So let's go to some tools. How do we apply these lessons and what do we do? Let's go to reframing. The number one thing I want you to remember is take that pressure from a threat and move it to a challenge, right? So when the pressure comes up, you say, yes, this moment matters to me. This means something to me. My body is ready, right? I'm ready for this. Instead of, oh, if I fail, it's all over. A quick break to talk about the Yerkes-Donaldson inverted U, which is where we talk about arousal in sports performance. Now, arousal is the word, it might, it's basically how heightened is your state, right? If you're going to enter a boxing ring, MMA ring, or even run 100 meters, you're going to want a heightened state, right? You're going to be pumped up. You have your pump up music on. You'll be like jumping up and down, ready for that short burst of challenge, right? So that, when we call it inverted U, it's like a bell curve. If you've ever done a exam, if you've ever seen that, most of the exam results will be at 50%, and then you'll have, as the bell curve comes down, you'll have the lower scores and the higher scores. Same as that with your heightened arousal scale. So if you're going to go in the MMA ring, you want to be heightened state because you don't want to go in there and be chilled out and just kind of see what happens, right? But if you want to run a marathon, you don't want to be at a heightened state at the start, unless you're going to go for a world record or something. But the majority of us mortals want to be kind of as chilled and measured and at the lower part of that inverted U. So if you're thinking about the inverted U on a scale of 0 to 10 on the Borg, like a Borg scale, then we're looking at where do you want to sit on there to bring your best performance. And that's why when the pressure comes, it's going to knock up your level on that scale. And you want to be able to control it to bring it back. And we talk about ways that we can do that, such as go into the race expo with your hoodie on and your earbuds in if you are introvert, right? To bring it down. Or if you're extrovert, go and meet as many people as you want and have a ball. Breathing, mindfulness, visualization, focusing on mantra, focusing on task and process over outcome. And these are the ways that we can bring that arousal down to the level that you want it to be for you. So that's a bit of a side thing. Second practical tool, chimp purging, right? Once again, back to last week's episode, really important to understand what the chimp brain is and how it hijacks your human brain or your prefrontal cortex. And so you can write out all of your fears, write them all out, and just let the chimp vent. Remember, the chimp's kind of like a little child that needs to have a tantrum. So you can even just get a buddy and say, hey, can you just listen to me because I've got all this going on and I just need to vent it and actually purge it, if you like. And if you can do it in a safe environment, it lets the chimp be heard. And you can say all these things. Maybe there's some work you have to do to ameliorate the possibility these things happen, or you just need to be heard, and then it's like, oh, thank you for seeing me and understanding my fears. Let's get back to it. Chunking down, breaking the task into manageable units. One of the ways I write this podcast is I work in 20-minute chunks. And so I set my timer for 20 minutes, and I say I'm just going to work for 20 minutes, and I'll write, I'll find stories, I'll find research. Because you sometimes sitting down reading this research papers is very dry. And so if I say, I'm just going to do it for 20 minutes, and I break it into chunks. Same with your racing or your long training run or ride or swim or whatever you're doing. Break it down, right? I'm not going for a 30K run. I'm just, in my mind, I'm just going to focus on getting those first 5Ks really cruisy, getting into stride, and that's what I'm going to focus on, and then taking it from there. Okay, cool. So micro focus. Pre-performance rituals, just like these athletes in the study, right? Breath work, breathing resets, learn how. Do you like that box breathing in for four, hold for four, out for four, hold for four? Do you like the deep breathing where you actually breathe in, hold, and then breathe out? Or do you do a 5 breath reset? How do you use your diaphragm to calm you down? Because the premise with the breathing stuff is if you've got time to take a deep breath and it says to your body there's no danger, right? So when your body's responding to danger, it's tightening up and it's moving the blood to the extremities for you to run or to fight, right? And so if you say, I'm taking a bit deep breath, the body's like, well, there mustn't be any danger because they wouldn't be doing this. Just needed a quick sip. Okay, mental imagery, right? Go over your race or your task in your mind over and over again, right? Watch yourself doing it perfectly. Watch yourself doing it exactly as you want right through to the end. Then the ninja level is start to put in mistakes and things that could go wrong. This is where Bob Bowman took Michael Phelps through imagery after imagery after imagery of things going wrong. Jumping into so Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympian of all time, jumping into the water, goggles coming off, missing the start, turning last, you name it. They went through all of those in mental imagery, and that's what you can do too. So you get to a checkpoint in an ultra and your crew's not there, and your drop bags, the truck's broken down on the way, and no one's drop bags there, right? But you know that you've prepared for that because you've got the spare little bottle and bar in your pack, which will get you through to the next checkpoint, right? Or you've got the water filter so you can get something from a stream along the way. And so you can see these potential errors, and then you can start to have strategies to overcome them in your imagery. Okay, cool. Okay, pressure ladder. This is interesting out of the study. So what they were talking about was simulating pressure in training, right? So maybe your intervals are timed, or maybe you set an unrealistic time or a really tough time for you to hit in your intervals. So you're simulating the pressure, right? You might put on your entire race kit, pack all your clothes you're going to wear, and have that in training so you know exactly what it feels like to be running with a pack, your poles, all the equipment you've got to carry, mandatory gear, etc. And then racing with other people. So maybe you want to enter a couple of races before your race just to get that race energy around you so it's not overwhelming on race day. Right? Even if you're just going to do a few park runs, just to feel what it's like to be in the pack or have people around you, and you get where I'm going. So the pressure ladder is almost like exposure therapy in psychology, where if you've got a fear of elevators, you might start by looking at a picture of elevator, if you could do that, or just saying the word elevator. Then maybe one day you might go to a building and have a look at an elevator, not go in it, of course. And the next time you go back, you might press the button and watch the doors open and close, watch other people get in there, and eventually you might walk in there but don't actually ride it. And this is all when you're ready, right? And then eventually you might jump in the elevator and ride it. So the same thing with the pressure ladder is how can you simulate pressure in training? And that is exposing yourself to the pressure, that realizing that you can handle it, right? Because that's a lot of the parts, the meaning that we put on it, the uncertainty that you have around it. It says, like we said earlier, it's exceeding our level of ability. And that's what I'm actually afraid of. So expose yourself to pressure and really try to put yourself in those uncomfortable positions if that's the thing for you. All right. So short and sweet, this episode, but hopefully you got something out. What I really want you to understand was how you do pressure. And I'm hoping you've got a little understanding of, is it other people's expectations? Is it the Strava file? Is it the social media thing? Is it your running group? Is it your family? Is it your partner? your kids or, somebody that is looking to you and do you feel responsible because you're doing all this training that you need to have a performance out of it, right? Is it that you want to run faster than you did last year in the race? Is it that you had a DNF and now you don't want to have a DNF this year? What is your flavor? Is your identity tied to it? Like, if I don't finish this race, I'm not good enough, right? Ouch, right? But understand it. Once you understand it, you can do something with it, right? But until you have the awareness, like Jung said, it's kind of like that lion that's trying to eat itself, right? You don't know what's there. It's got power over you. So get the awareness. Understanding that pressure is neutral and it's how we perceive it that shapes our performance. Um, and understand that elite athletes have it too, right? All the athletes in the study, Greg LeMond, Leslie Patterson, and they had ways that they dealt with it. It took Greg LeMond a few days into that 1989 Tour de France, after being out for 2 years. It took him a few days of racing to realize what he was doing in his head, and he reframed it and it went on to win, right? So we don't want to fight the pressure. We want to use it as our superpower to sharpen our focus, to energize our performance, and ultimately to grow. So we can look back and go, wow, I did that. I felt that pressure and I changed it into a challenge instead of this threat. And I went through it and I did it. I'm going to embody that to take it into my next performance. All right, so next time you're thinking about your race or you're at the start line, your chest is tightening and you're all tense and you're thinking, oh, I can't mess this up. I can't blow this race. This is so important to me. Go back to pressure is not your enemy. It's your brain saying, this matters to me, right? This is important to me. And then think about the tools we learned today. Think about the stories to reframe it and to release that pressure and to really step into your potential and thrive, right? And so with that, just remember your best performance is on the other side of that pressure. And if you've ever heard me talk about Phil Stutz's book, The Tools, it's about 20 years old now, I think. But one of those ways that he changed from challenge to threat was bring it on. He imagined that pressure as a dark cloud in front of you. And instead of hiding away from it, he's like, bring it on. The pain sets me free. And he imagined visualizing running through that dark cloud to the other side of that feeling where your potential and your best performance is waiting for you. Thanks for listening. I hope this was useful in some way and you gained awareness of your pressure building method or strategy and some tools with how to overcome it. And for all those who have got upcoming races in this race season, I wish you all the very best. And if there's one request I could ask, could you share this episode or an episode, your favorite episode, with somebody that you know who could benefit from this podcast? That would be the best way you could help me and to continue, the time and resources that I put into it. Thanks so much, and I'll see you on the next episode.